It all started with a swing. Or, more accurately, it all ended with one. Before the letters, before the laminated notes, before the concrete truck cracked my driveway and a piece of Vermont ski lift history was dangling from a steel girder on my front porch, there was peace. There was a gentle, hypnotic creak. There was the perfect arc against a sunset that looked like a spilled glass of tequila sunrise. There was my swing. And then there was Carol. Let me tell you about that swing. It wasn't some flimsy, mass-produced thing from a big-box store. I found it in a dusty corner of a salvage yard, a skeleton of weathered oak and rusted chains. I spent a month restoring it. I sanded every inch by hand, coaxing the deep, rich grain back to life. I replaced the chains with thick, silent rope. I used 4 coats of marine-grade varnish, the kind they use on boats, to protect it from the elements. It was a 2-seater, wide and impossibly comfortable, contoured by decades of forgotten sitters. It wasn't just a piece of furniture, it was a testament to the idea that some things are worth saving. My house is in a subdivision called Pleasant Valley Estates. The name is a masterpiece of marketing fiction. There's no valley, and the level of pleasantness is a topic of constant, silent debate. Our houses are a study in beige conformity, each with a meticulously manicured lawn that looks like it was cut with surgical scissors and a ruler. The neighborhood motto, printed on a ridiculously ornate sign at the entrance, is Harmony in Community. What it really means is, don't you dare plant azaleas when everyone else has hydrangeas. I work from home as a graphic designer, which means my daily human interaction often involves arguing with clients over the kerning of a font in an email. My porch swing was my escape hatch. At precisely 4:30 p.m. every day, I'd shut my laptop, grab a cold IPA from the fridge, and plant myself on that swing. It was my ritual. The gentle sway was my decompression chamber, melting away the stress of a day spent making logos pop more. It was where I watched thunderstorms roll in, where I listened to baseball games on the radio, where I did my best thinking. That swing didn't just hang on my porch, it held my sanity together. On this particular Tuesday, the kind of late spring day that makes you forgive winter for ever existing, I was at peak tranquility. The air was warm, the beer was cold, the birds were chirping. It was a suburban Rockwell painting come to life. And then I saw her. Carol. She lived 2 houses down, in a beige box identical to mine, but hers had an air of militant tidiness. Her lawn was a perfect emerald carpet. Her rose bushes stood at attention like soldiers on parade. Carol was a woman in her late 50s who moved with the stiff-backed purpose of someone who believes they are the sole authority on everything. She was marching across her lawn, then the next, her sensible walking shoes making grim, determined prints in the grass. Her destination my porch, my sanctuary. I took a long, slow sip of my beer, hoping that if I stayed perfectly still, she might mistake me for a garden gnome and move on. No such luck. She stopped at the edge of my lawn, her hands on her hips, her head tilted. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the swing, her eyes narrowed with the kind of intense scrutiny usually reserved for a ticking bomb. The gentle creak of the ropes suddenly sounded like a death knell. The age of peace was over. The war for the porch was about to begin. "Leo," she said. It wasn't a greeting, it was an accusation. "Carol," I replied, giving a little mock salute with my beer bottle. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" She ignored the pleasantry, her gaze still fixed on the object of her obsession. "I've been meaning to talk to you about the apparatus." "The apparatus?" I looked around, feigning confusion. "If you mean the lawnmower, I swear I'm going to get to it this weekend. The grass is getting a little expressive." "No," she said, her voice tight. "The swinging apparatus, She gestured toward it with a stiff, two-fingered point, as if touching the air around it might be contagious. It's come to my attention that it poses a significant safety risk. I blinked. I looked at my beloved 2-mile-per-hour swing, then back at her. A safety risk? Carol, it's a piece of wood on a rope. The most dangerous thing about it is the potential for splinters, and I've varnished that possibility into oblivion. It's the unregulated pendulous motion, she stated, as if she were reading from a physics textbook she'd written herself. The arc is unpredictable. It creates a kinetic hazard. I had to stop myself from laughing out loud. It would only empower her. A kinetic hazard? For who? Are you concerned about low-flying aircraft? Do you think a rogue squirrel is going to get clipped on the backswing? For the children, she said, her voice dropping to a dramatic, concerned whisper. And pets. And our valued delivery personnel. They use the sidewalk. She pointed to the strip of concrete, 10 feet away from the porch, a sidewalk so rarely used I once saw a dandelion successfully grow through a crack in the middle of it. Imagine a child, running carefree, who misjudges the oscillation perimeter. The potential for blunt force trauma is, frankly, alarming. Oscillation perimeter? Was she for real? Carol, I've lived here for 4 years. The only child I've ever seen on this sidewalk was on Halloween, and he was dressed as a snail, so his speed wasn't exactly a factor. And the Amazon guy literally throws my packages from the street like he's trying for a 3-pointer. He's in no danger. She was unfazed. Her arguments were clearly pre-rehearsed, a product of a long, lonely afternoon with a thesaurus. It's also the principle of the thing, Leo. This is a community of serene stability. A large moving object on the facade of a home is visually disruptive. It's not in compliance with the neighborhood's general safety mandate. This was a new one. The general safety mandate? Is that a real thing? Was there a memo? Because all I get are flyers for gutter cleaning and pizza coupons. It's an unwritten rule, a shared understanding among responsible homeowners that we maintain an environment free of unnecessary risks and aesthetic discord, she sniffed. This thing violates both. I took a deep breath, trying to channel my inner Zen master, a person who, I was quickly realizing, did not exist. Carol, it's a porch swing. People have had them for, I don't know, 100 years? I think the Republic has managed to survive. It makes me happy. It's not hurting anyone. Happiness is not a factor in risk assessment, she said, delivering the line with the cold finality of a hanging judge. She finally looked me in the eye, her own eyes like 2 little chips of granite. I'm not asking you to do anything just yet. I'm simply making you aware of the potential liabilities. I'll be monitoring the situation. With that, she turned on her heel and marched back to her beige fortress, her mission of spreading joylessness complete. I sat there for a long time, my beer growing warm in my hand. The gentle sway of the swing now felt defiant. The creak of the ropes sounded like a battle cry. I looked at the empty sidewalk, a concrete wasteland devoid of carefree children and endangered pets. She hadn't just complained about a swing. She had declared war on my tranquility. And as I sat there, oscillating within my perimeter, I had a feeling this was far from over. She was monitoring the situation. Great. I had my own personal KGB agent, and her only weapon was mind-numbing suburban nonsense. For a week, there was an uneasy peace. A cold war. I'd sit on my swing, and I could feel her eyes on me from behind her pristine bay window. I made a point of swinging a little higher, a little more recklessly, just to spite her. I'd wave cheerily in her direction whenever I caught a glimpse of her curtain twitching. It was petty, yes, but it was all I had. I told my best friend Dave about the encounter. An oscillation perimeter? He'd howled with laughter over the phone. She's a gift, man. A walking, talking content generator. You should start a blog. It's not funny when you're living it, Dave. I feel like I'm under surveillance. I'm half expecting a drone to fly by and measure my swing's arc degree. Just ignore her, he said. The classic advice of someone who doesn't have a Carol living 2 doors down. People like that thrive on attention. Deprive her of it, and she'll move on to complaining about someone's wind chimes. If only it were that simple. The first official shot was fired the following Tuesday. I found it taped to my front door. It wasn't just a note. It was a document. It was printed in an austere Times New Roman font on thick, important-feeling paper. The headline read, "Official Community Notice Regarding Unsecured Fixtures." It was a multi-point screed about the dangers of my swing, citing potential for property damage in high winds and unauthorized modification to home exterior. It was signed Carol Ann Adams, Chairperson, Concerned Neighbors Safety Committee. I knew for a fact that this committee consisted of her, herself, and the imaginary scepter of authority she carried around in her purse. And the whole thing was laminated. Who laminates a complaint letter? It's a level of passive-aggressive permanence that is truly terrifying. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a historical record of her displeasure. I ripped it off the door and called Dave immediately. She laminated it, Dave. Laminated. What kind of psychopath does that? Okay, that's next level, he admitted, a note of awe in his voice. That's not just a complaint. That's a trophy. She's going to mount that on her wall one day. I was still fuming about the laminated insult when the mail arrived the next day. Tucked among the junk mail was a crisp, business-sized envelope from the Pleasant Valley Estates Homeowners Association. My stomach dropped. I knew what it was before I even opened it. The letter was formal, cold, and dripping with Carol's uniquely verbose brand of nonsense. It seemed she'd found a real, albeit ridiculously vague, bylaw to hang her hat on. Article 4, Section 2B. All exterior additions or fixtures, including but not limited to recreational equipment, must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee to ensure they are in keeping with the aesthetic harmony of the community. My swing, the letter informed me, was never approved. It was an outlaw. I was given 14 days to remedy the violation. The remedy, of course, was its complete removal. I felt a surge of pure, helpless rage. She'd done it. She'd weaponized the HOA. She'd taken my simple, harmless joy and strangled it with red tape. There was no one to appeal to. A quick search revealed that the head of the Architectural Review Committee was, you guessed it, Carol Ann Adams. Defeated, I spent that Saturday afternoon with a wrench and a heavy heart. I unbolted the ropes. I carefully lowered my swing to the porch floor. The entire time, I could feel her watching. I didn't even have to look. The smugness radiated from her house like heat waves off asphalt. As I carried the pieces of my beloved swing into the garage, I caught a glimpse of her, a shadowy figure in the window, giving a slow, triumphant nod. I sat on the empty porch, the hooks in the ceiling looking like sad, lonely question marks. The space felt cavernous and silent. The tranquility was gone, replaced by a bitter, simmering resentment. She had won. But as I sat there, stewing in my own beige-tinted misery, a tiny, rebellious spark ignited in the back of my mind. She wanted me to remove the unapproved fixture. Fine. But the bylaw said nothing about what I could replace it with. The next few days were bleak. My 4:30 p.m. ritual was ruined. I'd just stand on the empty porch with my beer, feeling the phantom sway of my long-gone swing. The silence was maddening. It was a monument to Carol's victory. "You have to fight back," Dave said during our nightly strategy call. This aggression will not stand, man. How? I sighed, slumping into a kitchen chair. She controls the HOA. She's like a tiny, khaki-clad dictator. What am I going to do, install a slightly different swing? She'll just nuke it from orbit with another bylaw. Okay, so a swing is out. What about a bench? A bench? I said, offended. A bench doesn't swing, Dave. It just sits. A bench is a statement of utter and complete surrender. It's the furniture equivalent of a white flag. I might as well put up a sign that says, Carol was right. Fine, no bench. He was quiet for a moment. What about a hammock? A really obnoxious, brightly colored one, like tie-dyed. Getting warmer, I mused, but still too relaxing. I'm not looking for comfort anymore. I'm looking for a message. I need something that screams, I'm following the letter of the law, but I am dead inside and my spite will be your undoing. We spent the next hour spitballing increasingly absurd ideas. A trapeze bar, one of those coin-operated rocking horses you see outside grocery stores, a taxidermied alligator in a lawn chair. The ideas got more and more unhinged as we drank more beer. Nothing felt quite right. It had to be perfect. It had to be something that was, technically, seating, but so visually jarring, so out of place in our sea of beige, that it would give Carol a conniption every time she looked out her window. The answer came to me at 2 a.m. I was mindlessly scrolling through my phone, unable to sleep, when I stumbled upon one of those "you won't believe what people sell online" articles. There were haunted dolls, used celebrity chewing gum, and then I saw it. The heavens parted. A choir of angels sang Handel's Hallelujah chorus in my head. The listing was from a ski resort in Vermont that was upgrading its lifts. The title read, Decommissioned Yan Lift Double Chair, Red. The picture showed a classic, bright red, 2-person ski lift chair. It had the footrest, the sidebars, and the big, chunky safety bar you pull down over your lap. It was weathered and a little dented. A veteran of 1,000 blizzards and 1,000,000 skiers. It was functional. It was industrial. It was utterly, breathtakingly, magnificently absurd. It wasn't a swing. It didn't have a pendulous motion. It would be a permanently installed fixture. A chair, just a chair. A chair that happened to be designed to hang from a steel cable hundreds of feet in the air. A slow, maniacal grin spread across my face. The kind you see on a villain in a cartoon right after he's finished tying the hero to the railroad tracks. I grabbed my laptop. Carol wanted to talk about safety? Fine. I was about to install a piece of equipment so over-engineered for safety it was practically a personal bomb shelter. She wanted aesthetic harmony? I was about to introduce a splash of ski-bum chic into her beige hellscape. She had taken my swing. I was going to replace it with a mountain. My quest began with an email sent at 2:15 a.m. to an address I found on a grainy PDF flyer for the Killington Resort Annual Equipment Sale. My recipient was a woman named Stacy, listed as the Fixed Asset Liquidation Coordinator. I tried to sound as normal as possible, which is difficult to do when you're asking about installing ski resort hardware on a suburban porch, to stacy.p@killingtonresort.net. From leofitz@email.com. Subject, Inquiry Re. Yan, lift double chair. Dear Stacy, I saw your listing for the decommissioned Yan lift chair. Item #7B, red. I am very interested in purchasing one. Could you please confirm if it's still available and provide details on shipping to the 46220 zip code? Thank you, Leo Fitzpatrick. Her reply came the next morning, blunt and to the point. To leofitz@email.com. From stacy.p@killingtonresort.net. Subject, Inquiry Ari, Yan lift double chair. Leo, it's available. Shipping is freight. It's heavy. What are you using it for? Bench for a mudroom? Lawn art? Need to know for the invoice description. S. This was the tricky part. I had to sell the idea without sounding like a complete lunatic who needed to be placed on some kind of watch list. 2. Stacy.p@killingtonresort.net. From leofitz@email.com. Subject, inquiry, Yan lift double chair. Hi, Stacy. Thanks for the quick reply. It's for a custom seating project on a covered porch. Think of it as an avant-garde bench with superior elevation. So, custom outdoor seating fixture would be a great description for the invoice. Best, Leo. There was a long pause. I imagined her reading my email, taking a long sip of coffee from a thermos, and wondering what was wrong with people from Indiana. Her reply finally came late that afternoon. To leofitz@email.com. From stacy.p@killingtonresort.net. Subject, inquiry, Yan lift double chair. A porch, huh? That's a new one. All right, your funeral. The chair is $450. Freight shipping on a pallet is going to be another $600. It weighs about 250 pounds, and the mounting bracket is a beast. You're going to need more than drywall screws to hang it, city boy. Let me know if you want to proceed and I'll send the payment link. S. City boy. I liked her. She had spunk. The price was steep. Over $1,000 for an act of pure, unadulterated spite. I didn't hesitate for a second. I hit reply. Proceed. The next week was spent in a state of giddy anticipation. I got a tracking number for the freight shipment. I watched my glorious chariot of vengeance make its way across the country on a website with a map and a little truck icon. Pennsylvania, Ohio. Finally, it arrived at a depot in Indianapolis. The delivery was scheduled for Friday. I told Dave I'd pulled the trigger. You spent $1,000 on a ski lift chair? He asked, his voice a perfect blend of horror and admiration. My God, your pettiness has reached a new fiscal plateau. I'm so proud of you. It's an investment, Dave. An investment in my own mental health. Every dollar is a tiny pinprick in the balloon of Carol's self-satisfaction. Just make sure it doesn't fall and kill someone, he warned. The irony of her being right about the safety risk would be too much to bear. Don't worry, I said, my voice full of confidence I didn't entirely feel. I have a plan. On Friday, a massive semi-truck, the kind of rig that makes the whole house vibrate, rumbled down our quiet suburban street. The driver, a guy with a beard that looked like it had its own ecosystem, expertly maneuvered a pallet jack down the ramp. On top of a large wooden pallet sat my prize, the cherry bomb, as I'd decided to call it. It was even more magnificent in person. The red paint was faded and chipped in places, revealing the gray metal beneath. It had a small dent on one side, probably from a collision with a rogue ski pole. It smelled faintly of rust and cold mountain air. It was a chunk of industrial history, a veteran of countless blizzards, now sitting incongruously at the end of my beige driveway in the middle of the flat Midwest. Carol's curtains twitched violently. I gave the driver a $50 tip and a huge grin. He just shook his head, climbed back in his truck, and rumbled away, leaving me alone with my 250-pound problem. It was bigger, heavier, and more intimidating than I'd imagined. Dave was right. Drywall screws weren't going to cut it. I was going to need a professional. I was going to need a contractor who was just as crazy as I was. My search for a contractor began, as all modern quests do, with Google. I typed in General Contractor Indianapolis. The first few results were slick, corporate-looking companies with names like Prestige Home Solutions and Artisan Builders. I called the first one. Hi, I said to the cheerful receptionist. I have a somewhat unusual installation project. I need to hang a heavy object from my porch ceiling. Certainly, sir, she chirped. Is it a heavy-duty ceiling fan? Or perhaps a large chandelier? Not exactly, I said, taking a breath. It's a decommissioned ski lift chair. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I think I heard a cricket. Finally, she said, "Sir, I think you may have the wrong number," and hung up. The next 2 calls went similarly. One guy laughed so hard he started coughing and had to end the call. The other just said, "Nope," and hung up before I could even finish the sentence. I was beginning to lose hope. Was my grand vision going to be thwarted by a lack of qualified, open-minded labor? I scrolled further down the search results, past the glossy ads and into the digital hinterlands. That's where I found him. The ad was simple, no frills, just text on a white background. Gus's General Contracting, no job too weird. It had a picture of a guy who looked like he'd been chiseled out of a block of granite and then left out in the sun for 60 years. He had a magnificent white mustache and eyes that had seen things like leaky faucets, shoddy electrical work, and, I hoped, the dreams of petty men seeking glorious revenge. I called the number. A gravelly voice answered on the first ring. "Gus." No hello, no company name, just Gus. "Hi, Gus. My name is Leo. I saw your ad, the part about no job too weird." "Yep," he grunted. "What you got? Someone get a car stuck in their swimming pool again?" "Even better," I said. "I bought a ski lift chair and I want to hang it on my front porch." There was a pause, but it wasn't the dead silence of the other contractors. It was a thoughtful, calculating silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. "A ski lift chair," he finally said, his voice flat. "Huh? Okay, where you at?" An hour later, a dusty Ford F-150 that looked like it had personally survived the Cretaceous period rumbled up to my house. Gus climbed out. He was exactly as advertised. Tall, wiry, with a face full of wrinkles that told 1,000 stories, most of them probably involving a building inspector and a questionable permit. He walked right past me, straight to the pallet in the driveway. He circled the cherry bomb, kicking one of its legs lightly, then running a calloused hand over the mounting bracket. He looked up at my porch ceiling, then back at the chair. He squinted. "What's the story here?" he asked, finally turning to me. "You a big skier?" "Never been in my life," I admitted. "This is a long story, but the short version involves a neighbor, a complaint about my old porch swing, and a deep, abiding need for malicious compliance." Gus's leathery face broke into a raw, wide grin, revealing a set of surprisingly white teeth. The grin transformed him from a surly old contractor into a mischievous wizard. "A Karen, huh?" he rasped, a twinkle in his eye. "Oh, I know all about them. Had one down in Carmel call the city on me because my paint tarps were disrupting her morning vista. A vista of her neighbor's garage." He shook his head and chuckled. "Say no more, kid. I'm in." We stood on the porch, Gus staring at the ceiling like a surgeon planning a complex operation. "All right," he said. "All business now. This is what we're gonna do. Your current setup is useless. Those are just 2x6 joists up there. They'll hold a ceiling fan, not a quarter-ton of Vermont steel and 2 full-grown adults. We gotta open up the ceiling. We're going to install a steel I-beam, bolted directly to the main structural frame of the house. We'll run it perpendicular across 4 joists to distribute the load." My eyes glazed over. "Right. An I-beam. Then," he continued, warming to his subject, "we can't just hang the chair from it. That's amateur hour. We're gonna get a custom steel mounting plate fabricated maybe half-inch thick. We'll bolt that to the I-beam. The chair's original hanger can then connect to a heavy-duty swivel hook welded to the plate. It'll be a fortress." "That sounds expensive," I ventured. "It is," he said without apology. "But listen, that woman," he nodded in the direction of Carol's house, "is going to be your worst nightmare. She's going to call the city. She's going to call an inspector. She might even call a lawyer. So we are going to over-engineer the hell out of this thing. We are going to build this thing to survive a direct tornado strike. When the inspector comes, I want him to look at our work and weep with joy. We're pulling a permit for structural reinforcement and installation of specialty seating. It's all going to be 100% by the book. Her book, he jabbed a thumb toward Carol's house, is about to get a whole new chapter. I was in awe. I hadn't just found a contractor, I'd found a general, an artist, a fellow warrior in the great suburban holy war. "Gus," I said, extending my hand, "when can you start?" He shook it, his grip like a vice. "Parts are going to take a week to get fabricated. We start Monday after next. Tell your Karen to get her camera ready. She's going to want to get pictures of this." The Monday of the build arrived with a sense of momentous, earth-shaking importance. At 7:30 a.m., Gus's dusty F-150 rumbled down the street, followed by a much larger flatbed truck carrying a crew of 3 guys who all looked like they ate nails for breakfast. The 5th and most glorious arrival was a small crane, which parked itself at the edge of my lawn. The suburban symphony of birds chirping and sprinklers hissing was abruptly replaced by the thunderous roar of diesel engines and the heavy metal clang of equipment being unloaded. It was beautiful. Carol's front door opened almost immediately. She emerged in her battle dress pajamas, a pink robe and a visor, her phone held up to record the unfolding chaos. She looked like a war correspondent documenting the invasion of a peaceful nation. Gus saw her and gave me a wink. "Showtime," he muttered. The first day was all about demolition and preparation. The crew tore out a huge section of my pristine white porch ceiling, exposing the bones of the house. It was loud, dusty, and absolutely wonderful. Around 9 a.m., Carol marched over, her face a mask of practiced outrage. "Excuse me," she called out to Gus, who was directing the crane operator. "What is the meaning of this? You can't just perform major construction without a permit." Gus, master of the game, slowly reached into his truck and produced a clipboard. He pulled off a sheet of paper with a flourish. "City permit #734B, ma'am," he said, holding it out for her. "Approved last Thursday. Structural reinforcement and installation of specialty seating. All above board. You're welcome to look, but please stay off the active work site. Insurance reasons." Her face fell. She had expected to catch us red-handed, to be the hero who saved the neighborhood from my renegade construction project. Instead, she was just a lady in a robe looking at a piece of paper. She squinted at it, searching for a loophole, but Gus had done his job too well. Defeated, she retreated to her lawn, where she spent the rest of the day observing and occasionally taking photos, like a frustrated wildlife biologist whose subjects refused to do anything interesting. My role in all this was project manager of morale. I kept a cooler stocked with cold water and Gatorade, and made a lunch run for a mountain of barbecue sandwiches. The crew, initially skeptical, warmed up to the project once I explained the backstory. "So, let me get this straight," said one of the guys, a massive bearded man named Marco. "You're doing all this I-beam, the crane, all of it, because she made you take down a porch swing?" "That's the long and short of it," I confirmed. Marco took a huge bite of his brisket sandwich and chewed thoughtfully. "My wife's sister is like that," he said after a moment. "Complained that our mailbox was a non-standard shade of black. I respect this. I respect this a lot." My crew was on board. The highlight of the week was I-beam day. The crane, with a grace that defied its size, lifted the massive 20-foot-long steel beam high into the air over the roofline of my garage. The entire neighborhood seemed to pause. People on their morning walks stopped to stare. Cars slowed down as they passed. It was a spectacle. The crew expertly guided the beam through the hole in the porch ceiling and bolted it into the frame of the house with a series of deafening impacts from a pneumatic wrench. Each thwack, thwack, thwack felt like a nail being driven into the coffin of Carol's aesthetic harmony. Gus supervised the whole thing with the intensity of a master conductor. He checked every bolt, measured every angle twice. "Over-engineering is the best revenge," he grunted, giving the installed beam a satisfied pat. With the main support in place, the rest of the work was about finesse. They installed the custom mounting plate and the heavy-duty swivel hook, a piece of hardware so robust it looked like it could anchor a battleship. Then they patched up the ceiling, leaving only the ominous black hook dangling in the center, a promise of what was to come. Finally, it was time for the main event. Using the crane one last time, they carefully lifted the cherry bomb off its pallet. It swung gently in the air, a bright red pendulum of glorious spite. They guided it onto the porch and, with a final, satisfying clank, attached it to the hook. And there it was. It was done. It hung about 2 feet off the porch floor, a perfect height for sitting. It was more magnificent than I had ever dreamed. The industrial red was a vibrant slash of rebellion against the endless sea of beige. It was bold. It was ridiculous. It was a ski lift chair on a porch in the middle of Indiana. It was my masterpiece. Gus and his crew stood back, admiring their handiwork. "You know," Gus said, scratching his chin, "I've been doing this for 40 years. Built decks, additions, whole houses. But I think this," he gestured to the cherry bomb, "this might be my finest work." I paid him, adding a hefty bonus for exceptional service in the face of enemy surveillance. They packed up their gear and rumbled off down the street, leaving me alone with my creation. The sun was beginning to set. The clock on my phone read 4:28 p.m. It was time. I went inside, grabbed the coldest IPA from my fridge, and walked back out to the porch. I lifted the safety bar, sat down in the cold metal seat, and pulled the bar down over my lap with a resounding clunk. I gave a little push with my foot. The chair swung, smooth and silent on its over-engineered swivel hook. It was perfect. I took a long, victorious sip of my beer. I had won. My moment of triumph lasted for exactly 10 minutes. Then I saw the blue and red lights flashing down the street. A police car was pulling up to my curb. Of course, the final boss had been summoned. The police cruiser rolled to a stop right in front of my house, its lights painting my beige siding in strobing shades of red and blue. Carol was already on her lawn, arm outstretched and pointing at my porch like a prosecutor identifying the killer in a courtroom drama. She had clearly been waiting by the phone, finger hovering over the 9 and the 1, for this very moment. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a mustache that looked as tired as he did. He had the weary, seen-it-all posture of a man who had responded to one too many disputes over property lines and barking dogs. The other was much younger, trim, and professional, with a face that was struggling and failing to maintain a neutral expression. I mentally nicknamed them Johnson, the veteran, and Miller, the rookie. They ambled up my walkway, their boots making heavy sounds on the concrete. Johnson's eyes were fixed on the ski lift chair, a look of profound resignation on his face. Miller's eyes, on the other hand, were wide with a mixture of disbelief and what I desperately hoped was amusement. "Good evening, sir," Johnson said, his voice as dry as toast. He stopped a few feet from the porch, a safe distance from my kinetic hazard. "Mind telling me what in the Sam Hill I'm looking at?" "It's a chair, officer," I said calmly, giving a little demonstration swing. I made sure to keep the safety bar firmly locked in place. "Just a chair. Would you like to see its registration?" "Kidding. Chairs don't have registrations." Miller coughed, a sound that was suspiciously close to a snort of laughter. Johnson shot him a sideways glare that could have curdled milk. "Sir, we received a call," Johnson continued, pulling out a small notepad. "A call about, and I want to get this right, a public transportation vehicle being operated in a residential zone." I put my hand over my heart. "Officer, I am shocked and appalled. This is a private vehicle, see? No cables, no lift tower, no long line of people in ski boots. It's purely decorative and functional," I added, giving another gentle push. From across the lawn, Carol shouted, "It's an attractive nuisance, officer. It promotes risky behavior." Miller, who had been examining the massive steel beam now visible through the hole they'd left for the hook, finally spoke up. "With all due respect, ma'am," he called over to her. "What risky behavior exactly? Are you concerned he's going to try and ski off the roof?" I could have kissed him. Johnson, however, remained focused. "Your neighbor," he said, jerking a thumb in Carol's direction, "also stated that this is an unpermitted structure." This was the moment Gus had prepared me for. I gracefully swung my legs over the side, lifted the safety bar, and hopped off the chair. I walked into the house and returned with the clipboard Gus had left me. On it, protected in a plastic sleeve, was the permit. "Permit hash 734B, Officer Johnson," I said, handing it to him. "Approved by the city last week. Structural reinforcement and installation of specialty seating. All signed and sealed. My contractor, Gus, is a real stickler for the rules." Johnson took the clipboard and read the permit, his tired mustache twitching. He read it once, then he read it again. He looked from the paper to the I-beam, then to the chair, then back to the paper. He let out a long, slow sigh that seemed to carry the weight of all the petty squabbles in the world. "Specialty seating," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. He handed the clipboard back to me. "Well, sir, the permit looks to be in order. You're not breaking any laws that I can see." "It's a safety risk!" Carol shrieked, taking a few steps onto my lawn before seeming to remember she was on enemy territory. "Someone could fall off. A child could try to climb it." Johnson turned his weary gaze on her. "Ma'am, with all due respect, a child could also try to climb your oak tree, or that decorative fountain you have. Are we making trees illegal now?" He pinched the bridge of his nose. "This is a civil matter, an HOA matter. It is not a police matter. Please stop calling 911 about your neighbor's choice of patio furniture." He tipped his hat to me. "Have a good night, sir. Try not to, go too fast on that thing." Miller gave me a quick, almost imperceptible nod and a ghost of a smile as they turned to leave. They got back in their cruiser, the flashing lights went dark, and they drove off into the suburban twilight, leaving a profound and wonderful silence in their wake. I looked over at Carol. Her face was a thundercloud of impotent fury. She had fired her biggest cannon, and it had turned out to be a dud. She was out of options, or so I thought. She gave me one last look of pure venom, then spun around and marched back into her house, the door slamming shut behind her. I climbed back into my throne, pulled down the safety bar, and resumed my gentle swinging. The beer was still cold. The air was still warm. The war was not over, I suspected, but I had just won the most important battle. My porch was mine again. The story of the ski lift chair and the subsequent police visit spread through Pleasant Valley estates faster than a gossip column in a small town. My porch became an instant local landmark. The neighborhood Facebook group, usually a sleepy forum for posting about lost cats and recommendations for plumbers, absolutely exploded. The initial post was from Carol, of course. It was a novel-length rant, complete with blurry, zoomed-in photos of the chair, detailing her version of events. She called it a monstrosity, a blight on our community, and an affront to common decency. She accused me of endangering the entire neighborhood and flaunting city ordinances, a claim immediately debunked when someone else posted a photo of the permit, which I had proudly taped to my front window. What happened next was surprising. I expected a flood of support for her position, a digital mob of beige lovers demanding my head. And there were a few. A woman named Barb chimed in with, "I agree, Carol, it lowers property values." A man named Richard added, "My kids might see it and get ideas." But then the tide turned. A guy named Tom, who lived on the next street over, commented, "Honestly, Carol, I think it's hilarious. You made him take down a swing. He put up a ski lift. That's grade A, top shelf pettiness, and I for one salute him." The comment got 47 likes. Someone else posted, "My son thinks it's the coolest house on the block now. He calls it the ski lift house." The story took on a life of its own. Teenagers started walking by my house, taking selfies with the cherry bomb in the background. A local food blogger who lived in the neighborhood did a whole Instagram story about it, calling it a bold statement against suburban monotony. The most surprising show of support came 2 days after the police incident. My doorbell rang. It was Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, an elderly couple from the end of the block who I'd only ever waved to. Mrs. Henderson was holding a plate covered in aluminum foil. "We just wanted to bring you these," she said, her eyes twinkling as she handed me a plate of still warm chocolate chip cookies. "We saw the whole thing with the police, and we read the Facebook page." Mr. Henderson, a quiet man who usually spent his days tending to his prize-winning tomatoes, leaned in conspiratorially. "That Carol," he whispered. "She tried to get the HOA to fine us last year because our garden gnome was non-compliant with seasonal decor guidelines. It was May." He winked at me. "Love the chair, son. You've livened the place up." I had inadvertently become a folk hero. I hadn't just installed a chair, I had planted a flag. I was the leader of a tiny, silent rebellion against the tyranny of aesthetic harmony. The neighborhood was no longer united in its beigeness. It was a community divided, and the dividing line was a bright red ski lift chair hanging on my porch. Carol, it turned out, had one last arrow in her quiver. The nuclear option. She called for an emergency, all-hands-on-deck meeting of the Pleasant Valley Estates Homeowners Association. The agenda, emailed to every resident, had a single ominous bullet point: discussion and vote on the removal of an unapproved and hazardous structure at 1245 Harmony Lane. That was me. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile, windowless room that smelled faintly of chlorine from the nearby pool and quiet desperation. About 30 people showed up, a mix of Carol's loyalists, my newfound supporters, and a handful of neutral parties who were just there for the drama and the free stale cookies. Dave even came for moral support, sitting in the back row and giving me encouraging thumbs-ups. The HOA board, a grim-faced tribunal of 3, sat at a folding table at the front. The president, a man named Bob, who seemed perpetually tired, called the meeting to order. Carol, naturally, was given the floor first. She was prepared. She had a whole PowerPoint presentation. She clicked through slides filled with the blurry iPad photos she'd been taking. She used a laser pointer to circle parts of the chair, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. "Slide 4, pinch points," she declared, pointing to the hinge of the safety bar. "A clear danger to small fingers." "Slide 5, potential fall zones," she narrated, as an unsteady red arrow pointed to the ground 2 feet below the chair. "A fall from this height onto concrete could be catastrophic." "Slide 6, structural integrity," she said, showing a zoomed-in picture of the hook. "We have no way of knowing if this contraption was installed by a licensed professional." Gus, who I had invited and who was leaning against the back wall looking bored, let out a loud, theatrical cough at that last one. She wrapped up her presentation with a flourish. "This isn't just a chair," she concluded, her voice rising. "It is a symbol of defiance. It is a danger to our children, and it is a stain on the aesthetic harmony of our beautiful community. I urge the board to vote for its immediate removal." She sat down to a smattering of polite applause from her beige brigade. Bob, the president, sighed. "Thank you, Carol. Leo, do you have a rebuttal?" I did. I walked to the front of the room, holding a single piece of paper. I didn't have a PowerPoint. I had something better. The bylaws. "Good evening, everyone," I began. "First, to address the installation. It was performed by Gus here," I gestured to the back. "A licensed and insured contractor with 40 years of experience. The I-beam he installed is rated to hold 6,000 pounds. I think it can handle me and a beer. The entire project was permitted and approved by the city. So the safety argument, while delivered with great passion, is nonsense." I held up the bylaws. "Now let's talk about the rules. Carol was right when she had my swing removed. Article 4, Section 2B does prohibit unapproved recreational equipment. A swing is recreational equipment, but this," I pointed dramatically out the window toward my house, "is not. It does not swing on a long arc. It hangs from a single fixed point. According to its manual, its dictionary definition, and common sense, it is a chair." I let that sink in. "The bylaws also prohibit unapproved architectural additions. But the chair is not an addition. It is not attached to the house. It is attached to a support beam, which is part of the house. Therefore, it is a fixture. Specifically, it is a permanently installed single-axis stationary seating fixture." I had practiced that line with Gus for an hour. It sounded so official, so beautifully bureaucratic. "The bylaws," I concluded, "are very specific. They list things you can't have. Sheds, swing sets, plastic flamingos. A permanently installed single-axis stationary seating fixture is not on that list. Therefore, it is permitted. To vote to have it removed would be a violation of the HOA's own rules." I sat down. The room was silent for a moment. Then, Mr. Henderson, the garden gnome champion, started clapping. A few other people joined in. Dave was hooting from the back row. Carol's face had gone from pink to a deep, alarming shade of crimson. Bob, the president, looked at the bylaws, then at me, then at the sputtering rage volcano that was Carol. He looked exhausted. "A vote is a vote," he mumbled. "All in favor of the motion to demand removal?" Only 4 hands went up, Carol and 3 of her closest cronies. All opposed? Nearly 20 hands shot up. It was a landslide. The motion failed. And so here I sit. It's a perfect Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that started this whole mess. The sun is warm on my face. A cold IPA is sweating in my hand. From my vantage point, perched comfortably in the cherry bomb, I have a perfect view of Pleasant Valley Estates. The safety bar is down, locked securely in place. I give a little push with my foot, and the chair sways in a smooth, silent, and wonderfully limited arc. It's not the same as my old swing. It's better. It's a throne. It's a trophy. 2 houses down, Carol is out in her yard, viciously pruning her already perfect rose bushes. She refuses to look in my direction, but I know she knows I'm here. I know this bright red beacon of defiance is the first thing she sees when she looks out her window and the last thing she sees at night. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Dave. "How's the view from Mount Spite?" I text back, "Majestic." I take a long sip of my beer and lean back, the cool metal a comfort against my back. She said the swing was a safety risk. She wanted to protect the neighborhood from potential danger. Well, I'd gone and installed a chair that was designed, tested, and certified to safely dangle human beings hundreds of feet above a frozen mountain at 30 miles per hour. If anything, By replacing a simple wooden swing with a piece of industrial-grade transportation equipment, I had made my porch the single safest place in the entire subdivision. She should be thanking me.